The Housing Secretary, Michael Gove, has said he'll be absolutely willing to use legal rules to make builders pay for the removal of unsafe cladding from lower height buildings. Firms have until March this year to agree a plan to protect leaseholders trapped in unsellable homes. Gove's announced a series of reforms in the Commons today to protect leaseholders, and he said builders making significant profits should stump up under a polluter pays principle. Let's just have a listen back to what he had to say in the House.
We should not ask hard-working taxpayers to pay more taxes to get developers and cladding companies making vast profits off the hook. We'll make industry pay to fix all of the remaining problems and to help to cover the range of costs facing leaseholders.
Let's talk to Times Radio's political correspondent, Charlotte Ivers. Hi, Charlotte. Just take us through what was announced, if you would.
Well, this announcement by Michael Gove comes on top of previous commitments by the government to fund the removal of cladding from buildings above 18 metres. But that left a lot of people still in unsafe homes and still having to foot the bill. So today, Michael Gove has announced that if you are living in a building between 11 and 18 metres, then the government are asking the building company to pay for the cost of removing that cladding. Now, there are various ways in which they can attempt to do that. They've asked them nicely. They could also restrict access to these companies to government funding in the future. They could change planning rules or taxes on these companies, or they could potentially create a legal solution. But at the moment, they are asking, and they have been told, the Department for Housing have been told by the Treasury, if they cannot recoup this money from the developers, it will have to come from existing budgets. So no extra government funding for this.
Right, OK. So we've got to see what will happen. Various fences to jump before we get to this point. But they want the developers to pay for the cost of taking down the cladding, which, on the government's line now, Michael Gove's line now, they put up there, they should take it down. But how to make them do that? That's another question. I mean, using the tax system as a kind of, a stick. There's no particular carrot except asking them nicely, but a stick on top of the carrot, that's a new way of using tax.
It would be, and also as well, this would be a change to the way you see the government using things like their allocation of funding or their allocation of planning permission. We don't know exactly what would appear in the future. At the moment, the government are very much focused on, as you say, asking nicely. Some building companies are deciding that they will pay for the removal of this cladding. Some are less enthusiastic. They say they followed building regulations at the time, so why should they be asked to stump up now that those have changed?
I mean, how did it go down to the House? Because Michael Gove has been speaking just in the last few moments.
This is something we've seen a campaign on from many different MPs. There are a lot of MPs with constituents in these positions. And from the people I've spoken to in Whitehall about this, there has been a sense for a while that this is simply unfair and that something needed to be done. The problem is always, where is the money coming from? And clearly, Michael Gove has now decided where that money is coming from.
I saw Lisa Landy, who now shadows Michael Gove on this issue in the House. She wasn't convinced that the Treasury were there, ready to use tax as a stick if the time and the need arose.
No, this is the position that Labour has taken. They say that this is too weak an effort from the government. As I say, at this stage in the game, they are asking nicely. There is no promise of anything further down the line. We've heard a lot of tough words today, but yes, nothing legally in place to enforce this.
It's taken a long time to come up with this.
It really has. This, of course, comes in the wake of the Grenfell Tower disaster in 2017. So we are now 5 years on from that, and there are still people who are in unsafe homes.
Right, Charlotte Ivers, good to talk to you. Thank you for that. Now we can say good afternoon to Sophie Bichener, who's been impacted by this whole crisis. Sophie, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So, first of all, what are your thoughts on what you've been hearing?
Obviously, we started hearing about the announcement over the weekend, and we're kind of cautiously optimistic about what might be said, having not really heard much from government to help leaseholders since we all started campaigning for change.
Yeah.
So we're very cautiously optimistic, but I think since there's been more information come out about the plans that Mr. Gove has, there's still definitely some holes that need to be addressed. Right.
Let's talk about those then, because there are a lot of costs associated with this rebuilding work, this remedial work, which may not be covered by the announcement.
Yes, and those kind of things are very, very common in buildings that are impacted. They are flammable insulation, missing fire breaks, timber balconies, all things that are quite clearly fire safety defects, and many were against building regulations at the time the buildings were completed. But we seem to be saying that developers should be fixing the cladding, and that ends when it comes to all of these non-cladding items.
Yeah, although, mind you, until well, just now, you thought you were liable for the cost of the cladding too, which would have been, well, I say ruinous, but you got ruinous costs on your head as it is.
Yeah, so in my case, I was actually eligible for the Building Safety Fund funding, and out of my £208,000 bill, I would still be left with £60,000, which is all of those non-cladding items. And also I've paid, my building paid £250,000 for a fire patrol, and many buildings have insurance premiums up 3,000%. So it seems at the moment it's very unlikely that leaseholders will kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel with these announcements, with all of the other costs that are coming at us.
So, look, how much has it cost you so far?
I think I've paid around £8,000 in just waking watch costs alone. My service charge is up 200% or something crazy. I think I pay about £12,000 a year at the moment. And then we've got our waking watch costs, and also our fire alarm costs, and also some legal costs that have kind of come around because of all of this. So it's an ongoing strain financially for me, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be going anywhere, going away anytime soon.
Still enough to give you nightmares. I mean, have you tried to sell you live in a flat?
Yeah.
Have you tried to sell your flat?
I haven't even tried, because some people I think in our building have. They've been offered half the retail price in cash, by people that are trying to make a profit out of this situation.
Half the price?
Yep. And everyone else is just stuck because there's really been no clarity around what the size of our bill is going to look like. I mean, I think our bill in my building is one of the biggest in the country. So we really don't have any hope of moving on anytime soon.
Oh, that sounds like a complete nightmare, Sophie. And just living with this, you've had costs so far. You had this potential, although look, some of that burden may have now been relieved, but you had that hanging over your head. How's it affected your life? I don't know, the way your mood, your mental health, to put it simply.
Yeah, it's been really devastating, actually. So I reached out to my GP at the start of last year, suffering with really bad anxiety symptoms, which I didn't really know even at the time that was what that was. But yeah, it felt like a really heavy weight on my shoulders and a real crushing weight all of the time. I mean, I don't know if I will be bankrupted by this. Will I lose my job? How will I afford to travel to work, for example? All of the things that you kind of question late at night when you can't fall asleep, like that's all come from the building safety crisis. And I know there are thousands of people who are in exactly the same situation. So we were just, we need to have these announcements from Gove and make sure that all the gaps are filled. And I was in a meeting actually with Mr. Gove this morning, and was able to give him that kind of feedback about this announcement. And I know that from his announcement in Parliament just now that he will be looking at the non-cladding costs in the building safety bill going forward. So it's really key that does happen.
So more specifically on that, because that's going to be important to a lot of people. You've given us your reasons why, potentially thousands of pounds of costs in repair, remedial work that has nothing to do with the cladding. You put that to Michael Gove, you say, earlier on today. You said he's going to look at it. Was he any more specific? Was there any kind of promise, or what sounded like a promise, that he's going to relieve you of that kind of burden?
I think it's quite difficult for him to be promising those kind of things, because I think the scale of the non-cladding costs up and down the country is yet to be really uncovered. But I think going off what's just literally been said in Parliament, it sounds as though with the building safety bill that's coming in next month, there might be more news about non-cladding related items, especially these items that were against building regulations. I mean, it's incredible that leaseholders are even having to pay for that. So if there's some kind of mechanism that he or his colleagues can come up with that makes developers have to pay for that, then surely that's the right thing to do.
Because what's your ultimate hope for this, Sophie? I mean, you've been living with this worry for really rather a long time. Are you hoping to get in a position where you can sell your flat and move on?
Absolutely, yes. It is more like a prison to me at the moment. I don't consider it to be a home, so I've completely fallen out of love with where I live, and I can't wait to move away from that. So that's me with the end in sight. But I don't know if that would be 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. It's really hard to put a timeline on it, because we're still asking developers for voluntary contributions here. And in my case, my developer transferred their assets and closed the business down, so I don't even have a developer to rely on. And really, there should just be more consumer rights for leaseholders in this situation. If I buy a car, I buy a toaster, I buy a phone, and it turns out that part of it is malfunctioning or dangerous, you can send it back. And the fact that you can purchase a home in this country and you're left with a bill that's more than the place cost in the first place if something was built dangerously wrong is just incredible.
Sophie, lots of sympathy for what you've had to live with all this time, and thank you for sharing your experiences and your thoughts with us today. That's Sophie Bichener.